there, Duke fans. Welcome to episode number 137 of DBR Bites. We are here to preview the game coming up this weekend, the first of a Saturday-Monday double between Duke and the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. I'm Donald Wine. I'm your host for this episode. Jason Evans is with me. Jason, before we get started, I just want to let people know that we had a great conversation on our last episode about the Darian Minson lawsuit, what it means for all parties involved, what it means for maybe for college football as a whole. But as we record, just want to let people know that nothing has happened between the end of that episode and this one, because we're recording like 10 seconds later. So don't think that we are missing any updates.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go ahead and put a timestamp on it, Donald. It is 5:05 p.m. East Coast time. On Wednesday, I should note. So it's possible you won't be listening to this till late on Thursday, maybe even Friday, just in terms of when we put this episode out. If there has been a major development, we apologize. And by the way, we should also note, Donald, we should also note, you and I was going to be, the plan was, I was flying to Durham this weekend. I was going to go to the Saturday, Monday doubleheader. We have a fan of our podcast who's become a good friend of yours and mine. I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to get into that with him, but a great guy who has unbelievable seats inside Cameron, who was going to host me on Saturday, and then he wasn't even going to be there on Monday, and you were going to come down and join me on Monday. We were going to have a Duke doubleheader weekend sitting like courtside. It was going to be amazing. And then the weather forecast said to me, Jason, you ain't going no place near North Carolina this weekend.
That is correct.
So literally in the past 24 hours, I was forced to cancel my plane flight. I had a rental car. I had a hotel, 3 nights at a hotel, all of it canceled because of the incoming storm. And we may be doing, Donald, a preview now of a game that never happens, depending on how bad the storm is.
Jason, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to mention the fact that we were going to go down for this weekend for these games, and that this, what many are calling the biggest storm in decades, that's going to encompass 2/3 of the country, is bearing down on both you and I and on Durham. So again,
although the forecast has started shifting a little more north. Like I thought it was going to get me really bad.
Doesn't help me.
No,
it would not help me get to Durham. Durham right now is in the center of like that wintry mix, which everyone who's been to Durham knows. North Carolina can't handle that stuff. So in all seriousness, again, we don't know the forecast at this point as we're recording. We ask everyone out there, if you're going to this game on Saturday, please, and Monday especially, please be safe. Do not take any other extra precautions, or any dangers to get to this game. Honestly,
take extra precautions. That's what you mean to say.
Take all the precautions necessary. If that means staying home, I know how much these tickets cost. Stay home. It's going to be much safer for you there, and also listen to Duke if there's any changes with regards to if this game gets played on Saturday. But again, we're going to proceed as if it is. Wake Forest coming to town, 5:45 p.m. Eastern Time tip-off on Saturday on the CW, so everyone should be able to get the CW. Let's talk, Jason, first about who they've played, their record. They're 11-8 on the year, 2-4 in conference, and they have a few top 100 wins against Memphis, West Virginia, and in conference they have beaten Virginia Tech. Their early losses were to some really good teams by very, very close margins. They lost to Michigan by 1 in overtime in what was still one of the great games so far this season. They lost to Texas Tech by 1. We know that drill as well. So this is the team that has battled some really, really good teams and been very close. They've also lost to Oklahoma, Vanderbilt, and in conference, NC State, Miami, UNC, and SMU on Tuesday. Now, they have played on Tuesday, Jason. We obviously had this midweek break, and I'm really fortunate that we at least have this midweek break to get some rest in. But again, we may have to talk about not necessarily the rust word, but how to get back into the rhythm that we had so well out in the West Coast. 72nd in Ken Palm, 66 in the net. This is a quad 2 game as it stands right now in the net. And Jason, I know you had a comment on the schedule, but talk to me about what you've seen so far. I've seen some of Wake Forest play with the eye test, but talk about what you've seen so far with their schedule.
Yeah, like you mentioned, they're 72nd in Ken Palm. They started the year 49th. So this is a Wake Forest team that is performing lower than expectations were. By the way, they've played 5 quad. A game at Duke is a quad 1A game. That's like one of the toughest games any team will have on their schedule. Wake is 0-5 in quad 1 games this year. But like you said, they're capable of playing with anyone. I mean, you mentioned the Michigan and the Texas Tech games. They had the lead on both Michigan and Texas Tech with less than 5 minutes to go in those games. And they just blew it down. This Wake team is prone, and this is something to really watch out for, Donald. We've talked about the kill shot. Duke is great at 10-0 runs. 10-0 runs are referred to as a kill shot because it's so hard for a team to come back from something like that. This Wake team is prone to just absolutely getting kill shotted. There's no other way to say it. They've had a number of games where they were right in there, and then they just go through a terrible stretch. They played Oklahoma. They were tied with Oklahoma in the second half, and then over like a 10-minute period, they got outscored by 20 points. They were in a 4-point game at the half with NC State, and then in the first 8 minutes of the second half, they scored a total of 6 points. It got blown out. They were beating Miami with 5 minutes left, and then the Hurricanes went on a 10-0 run. Kill shot, done. They were in a really tight game with SMU. And like just a couple minutes in the second half, they give up a 13-2 run. Done. Like this Wake team, they'll play you even, and then suddenly they'll have a 3, 5, 7-minute stretch where they stink up the joint, and suddenly you got a double-digit lead. That's the way their season has been, a game after game after game.
And that bodes well for Duke because we love, going on those 10-0 runs.
Yeah.
And
the patented Duke run.
The patented Duke run in Cameron. It's the first time back in Cameron in a couple of weeks, right? So this is one where they can hopefully again get the rest that they need and then come back out and really come out swinging. But talk about the metrics with this team because again, and some of these metrics have kind of been weird because they've done well in non-conference, and then as they've gotten to conference, some of it's regressed a bit.
Yeah, exactly. This is a Wake Forest team that's better on defense than offense. They have a top 50 defense, and they are great at turnovers and steals. Duke needs to watch out for this. This Wake team is 15th in the country at turnover percentage. They get steals on 13% of possessions. I want you to think about that. Getting a steal, that's basically like 1 out of every 7 to 8. 1/7, 1/8 of a possession of each possession. Wake Forest is getting a steal. That's top 20 in the country at steals. But all that gambling on steals, it costs them a little bit because they're not a very big team. They don't protect the rim all that well. They've really only got one guy who's at all of a rim protector. I'll talk about him in a little bit. And as a result, they allow teams to hit better than 55% of their 2-point field goals. Wake's going for steals. They're trying to get the turnover. When that fails, they really allow teams to get good shots off of them. Their 2-point field goal defense, Wake Forest, is 308th in the country. That is extraordinarily bad, Donald. That is a formula. It is amazing, by the way, that this is a top 50 defense while giving up 55.6% shooting on 2-point field goals. It's kind of incredible that they're that good at that. The other thing is they're a bad defensive rebounding team. They give up offensive rebounds on a third of missed shots. So at bottom 100 in the land. So, and by the way, I should note in ACC play, did you see just the ACC numbers? This is amazing. They give up offensive rebounds. They give up offensive rebounds on almost 40% of missed shots in ACC play. Oh my God. How are you able to play defense like that? I don't know, but this Wake team is just they allow a lot of 3-pointers. By the way, that's another weird thing about them. Almost 50% of opposing shots come from 3, and they give up a ton of assists. Their defensive assist rate is like among the bottom 20 to 25 teams in the country. They give up assists on 61% of made baskets. Donald, Duke loves to assist on like we have a really high assist rate. Wake gives up a lot of assists. We're a really good 2-point field goal shooting team. Wake gives up a lot of 2-point field goals. As long as Duke doesn't fall into and we're a great offensive rebounding team, and they give up a ton of offensive rebounds. As long as Duke doesn't fall into the trap of giving up a lot of turnovers, then it's just hard to see what Wake is able to do to slow down the Duke offense.
And I think the one thing about going back to their offense, you mentioned some of the like national, like all, across the whole season, what their metrics are in conference. Some of those things, as I mentioned, have gotten worse. They don't get to the line at all. They're last in the conference. And
wait. I only did defense, dude. I only did defense. You jumping and doing.
My bad. My bad. Go ahead with offense. Go ahead. You got it.
Well, you took one of the things I was going to mention. There's a lot of things that they do well, but there's not on offense, but there's not much that they do great. And I was going to mention that they are terrible at getting the free throw line. Their offensive free throw rate is dead last in the ACC. No one in the conference gets to the free throw line less than Wake Forest does. They're okay at shooting 3-pointers. They hit about 33% on threes. That's fine. It's neither good nor bad. They hit about 54% of their twos, which is fairly good. They're like an average team at turning the ball over. By the way, they give up a lot more live ball turnovers, like steals, than giving up turnovers like losing the ball out of bounds or offensive fouls, that kind of stuff. So when they do turn it over, it tends to be a live ball turnover, which is bad because that means the team's going on you. And they're just a mediocre. I mean, I already mentioned their defensive rebounding isn't that good. Their offensive rebounding isn't that good either. They shouldn't really burn you from rebounding. So like I say, on offense, this is like basically like an average team. Actually, for power conference teams, it's kind of a poor offensive team. And there's nothing that they do that you go, that's something you need to worry about. There's, a lot of stuff that they do okay, but there's very little that they do really well on offense.
And I think another thing that, obviously Ken Pom, we've talked about this on the show, the new stat that they've done, average 2-point attempt distance.
Yeah.
They also take a lot of mid-range. The last few games we've played teams that love to take that mid-range jumper that most teams have kind of phased out of their game. They're trying to get close to the basket, but they take shots 6, 7, 8 feet, maybe at the free throw line, and they're kind of in that range instead of going to the basket. And it's because of the lack of size that they have, and I know you'll talk about that after the break. So without further ado, let's get to that break because we want to talk about the players. We want to talk about the things to watch in this Wake Forest game. So stick around. More on the Wake Forest preview from Jason Donald on the DBR Podcast.
The world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
I had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn, and I hire an energy vampire. But also they're a literal vampire. And suddenly my team is spending all their time sharpening wooden stakes and buying bulk silver and rehearsing ancient chants, and then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant takes insights from over 1 billion professionals to create a short list of the best fits for you. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
New Year, same extra value meals at McDonald's. So now get 2 snack wraps, plus fries, and a medium soft drink for just $8.
For limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher in Hawaii, Alaska, and California, and for delivery.
Kraft Mac and Cheese is better than 90s hip-hop. We'll remind you of your childhood without making you feel incredibly old. Kraft Mac and Cheese. Best thing ever.
We are back, and we turn our attention. Of course, we're still talking about our preview of the Wake Forest game that, as of right now, may or may not happen due to the weather, but we hope that at least safely it can take place. We're talking about the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Jason, let's focus on the players. And as I mentioned before the break, this team doesn't have a lot of size, but they have some really, really good players that when they heat up, they're among the best in the conference.
Yeah, there's no question about it. If you're going to talk about the players on Wake Forest, you need to start with Juke Harris. He is a sophomore wing for Wake Forest. He's big. He's 6'7", which is, pretty good size for a wing. A year ago, Juke Harris was just like a 6-point per game player. He was a freshman. As a sophomore, he has exploded. Dude is averaging 20.5 points per game this year. Like, he's someone who's capable of putting up 30 on you. And Duke fans should remember Juke Harris, because one of his best games his freshman year, Donald, you remember last year when Cooper Flagg and company, when we played Wake at Wake, we had a nice lead at halftime, and then Wake came out, absolutely blitzed us over the first 10 minutes of the second half. I looked it up. It was a 25-4 run that Wake went on in the second half against Duke. Now, Duke then came back and took control and ended up winning that game, but it was a way tougher game than anyone expected it to be. That was one of Juke Harris's best games of his freshman year. He had 14 points in that big game. He was a big part of that huge comeback by Wake Forest. Duke fans saw a glimpse of what could be in that game. Well, the entire country is seeing what Juke Harris can do this year. He likes to attack off the dribble. He is not a guy who's going to run off screens and then rise up quickly. He's someone they want to put the ball in his hands and then get out of the way and let him do his thing. Now, Juke Harris is not a super explosive athlete, but he's got really good body control, and he's able to absorb contact and still get off his shots. He is outstanding. I mean, really great at finding good shots and knocking them down. For a guy who takes a he shoots a lot. For a guy who takes a high volume of shots, get this number, Donald, he's hitting better than 58.5% of his twos. That's really amazing. Tough. That is, for a guard, for a high volume player to be hitting like 58, 59% of their 2-point field goals. Wow. And by the way, he can also shoot from outside. He's close to 36% on 3-pointers, and he takes a ton of threes. He has taken more 3-pointers on his season than Isaiah Evans has. And Isaiah fires it up there a lot. Juke Harris is putting that ball up there. Now, I think it's going to be really interesting to see, because I guarantee you Dame Sarr is getting this defensive assignment. And Dame's length and athleticism against Juke Harris's skill and, sort of creativity, a fascinating matchup in this game. If Dame Sarr is able to force Juke Harris into like a 4 for 14, 4 for 18 kind of game, Wake Forest is in big, big trouble. But on the other hand, there are not many players in this country who I'm like, that guy could be a problem for Dame. Dame may not be able to stop that guy. There's a small handful of guys who you would be worried about. Juke Harris is one of them. And if Juke Harris is able to get to his spots, get to the shots he wants, get off his 3-pointer against Dame Sarr, it could really disrupt what Duke is doing on defense. I think look, I've been out of the country, but I've been able to watch some replays. I've been able to watch some highlights and stuff like that. I got a little snippet of some of these games, Donald. Dame Sarr has transformed the Duke defense in recent games. If you're Wake Forest, one of the ways that you think you're able to disrupt what Duke has been doing lately is that you just have Juke Harris be better on offense than Dame Sarr is on defense. I think that's a fascinating, super important matchup for this game.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It also, for Duke at least, the great thing is guarding Juke Harris and putting Dame Sarr on him doesn't disrupt the flow of what we would do on defense. Right?
Exactly.
You could do the whole thing where you kind of go, Dame, you have one job. Goodbye. Like, go do your job. And then everyone else can kind of match up with the other guys, and we have a size advantage on almost everybody else on the floor.
Yeah, let me get to the other guys that I think are worth mentioning very quickly. Miles Colvin is their second leading scorer at 12.8 points per game. He's a dude who came over from Purdue. I mentioned Juke Harris went from like 6 points per game to 20 plus. Miles Colvin went from like 5 points per game at Purdue to almost 13 points per game at Wake Forest. He's really thrived, playing a bigger and bigger role. He played 2 years at Purdue. He's now a junior. He's a real hot and cold dude, by the way. Like, they played Queens earlier this year. Not Queens, New York, Queens from North Carolina. He had 33 points against Queens. Just the other day against SMU, big game for Wake Forest, he had 17 against them. But then they played Carolina a few days ago. He played 30 minutes, had 0 points. Miles Colvin, like 17 against SMU, 0 against UNC. And then they had a game against Morehead State earlier, like a bad team, Morehead State. Second leading scorer on the team, Miles Colvin, didn't make a single shot in that game. So he is a guy who blows hot and cold in a pretty big way. Let's hope he's blowing cold. Another guy to mention is Trevon Spillers. Duke fans should remember this dude from last year. Mm-hmm. Very athletic, very bouncy forward, guy who plays strong physical basketball, not afraid of any matchup. And his matchup is going to be Cameron Boozer. There's the only guy on the Wake Forest roster, I think, who has the size, the strength, the athleticism to stay with Cameron Boozer is Trevon Spillers. And he's going to be a huge part of any hope that Wake has of winning this game. By the way, Trevon Spillers is a fairly decent offensive player, gets about 11.5 points per game. He's their second leading rebounder, 5.7 rebounds per game. And I mentioned Wake doesn't have many shot blockers. He's the only guy who protects the rim for Wake Forest. He averages about 1.4 blocks per game. It's worth noting Trevon Spillers, not an outside shooter, has taken fewer threes on the season. Only 14 three. Like Patrick Gongba is a bigger threat from 3-point range, much bigger than Trevon Spillers is. The last guy I wanted to mention is their point guard, Nate Kalmise, averaging almost 11 points per game, 5 assists per game. He's a decent point guard. But here's the thing. He's 6'2", 185. He's got a decent frame. Like, he's not stick thin. He's got a decent frame, but not like super physical. 6'2", Donald. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I think this could be a game where if we need him, Caleb Foster will be able to get to where he needs to go, because CFOS is going to have size, weight, physicality on Nate Kalmise, and he could really take him to the hole. I was on the show from an airplane talking about that great game that CFOS had against Louisville, and it has not happened for CFOS since then. But playing against a slightly smaller guard like Nate Kalmise, this could be a time that CFOS is able to get into that attacking mindset again. And I'll say this, even if he doesn't, we've seen Caden Boozer step up a little bit more. Whoever Kalmise is guarding, whether it's CFOS or Caden Boozer, that guy from Duke is going to have like 3 inches and probably 15, 20 pounds. And I just think that's a matchup Duke could take advantage of.
Jason, if he doesn't have a good game this Saturday, Caleb Foster, then it sounds like you're going to have to get back on planes for the rest of the season. That's just how we got to do it. That's how life works sometimes. But as we transition into the things to watch, the first thing, Jason, that I mentioned kind of earlier is that it's not necessarily the rust word, but I know John Shire does not like this midweek break. He wants to keep the rhythm going. And after we had such a great week out west, again, the second team since Cal and Stanford joined the ACC to go out west and come back 2-0. He wants to keep that rhythm going, and especially how well we played against Stanford. He wants to continue to keep that rhythm, but we're going to have to kind of relearn it, right? We kind of have to figure out how to carry that momentum from last Saturday into this Saturday. So I hope we come out firing on all cylinders, despite the fact that we have this midweek break. I want this team to assert itself. I want the Cameron Crazies to be on it, and I think they will be, to give them the momentum needed for Wake Forest to have it where they don't feel like they're in this game and they're always having to play catch up. We've seen teams take early leads against us. We've had slow starts. And again, we've had to expend a lot of energy to kind of catch up and then take over the game. If we start that early, it's clear how easy we can, not necessarily coast, but how easy we can take a team out of the game by being us early on. So I'm hoping that we're able to get a really good start. Controlling the paint is something that we did quite well out west, and I want that to continue. I think the fact that you have Trevon Spillers kind of guarding the paint, but we're still in this situation where, okay, if he guards Cam Boozer, let's get Pat active. If he guards Pat, we give the ball to Cam Boozer, and then we have these guys like Caleb Foster, Caden Boozer, if they're able to go through the lane. Even Nick Minia did well out west at driving to the hole and going through contact to finish instead of trying to go around the contact and finish. I think this is the game where they're able to do that, and with the size advantage some of these guys have with these mismatches, they're going to have these opportunities. The final thing that I have is Wake sometimes has a tendency to get out of sorts, and like you mentioned, they're very good at. They may have the ball taken from them sometimes, but they're decently good at hanging on to the basketball. But in their losses, that threshold, Jason, that you have, of 12 turnovers being good or bad, right? More or less, they average 12 turnovers a game. And the games that they have performed well or performed the worst are games where they've had 13, 15 turnovers. They've been very loose with the basketball. They had one loss where they had 20 turnovers. And so they have a tendency sometimes to kind of not necessarily play wild, but just play out of sorts and play without any continuity. Duke has a great chance to disrupt that continuity. Like you said, with Dame Sarr kind of getting on Juke Harris and saying, not today. You may be able to get some points, but you're not going to affect the continuity of Wake's offense. And Wake trying to figure out how they're going to beat us without Juke Harris in the mix on a lot of these possessions, that's where Duke can take advantage. I think we'll be able to get some steals if we have the pressure defense that we've seen some of these guys play by, again, shutting down a Colvin or shutting down a Calamise. I think they'll be able to get out and run. And we haven't really seen them really get out and run, but also, again, it'll set up our offense where we can get into the paint, where it feels like, to me, Wake Forest doesn't have a lot of answers for both Cam Boozer and Pat Gogba.
Yeah, Donald, the last thing I'll say about all this is Ken Pomeroy expects Duke to win this game by about 20 points. I don't know that that's going to happen because, as we detailed at the beginning, this Wake team has played really good teams really close in the past. But I feel like the trajectory of their 2 seasons, Wake started out better and has been playing worse and worse. And I feel like Duke, we hit a rough patch for a little bit right around New Year's and just before it. Christmas, New Year's time was not great for Duke, but I especially that trip to California, I think this team is doing. I know you mentioned rust and taking the week off. I don't know. I saw an interview with John Shire, from the other day when he was doing the ACC coaches teleconference, and he said it's good for his team to have a few days off to really
absolutely.
After that long trip out to California, the guys get to kind of reset a little bit and really work on some things. I think it's different. This is different from like a Christmas break or an exam break where they do step back from basketball a little bit. I don't think they're stepping back from basketball this week. So I'm hopeful that rust will not be an issue, and Duke can look. ACC is tough no matter what. We saw it. Clemson, which was undefeated in the ACC, just lost to NC State last night. Or actually, when you're hearing this, it may be 2 nights ago, but in terms of us recording, it was just last night. So never presume anything. And they lost that game at home, by the way. Clemson did. Never presume anything in the ACC, but I feel pretty good that there's, as we detailed, there are a lot of matchups in this game against Wake where I feel like things probably work out well for Duke, in this one-on-one kind of matchup.
And with Clemson losing the other night, it means that Duke is the only team that remains undefeated in the ACC. The reason why I want to have this good start is, yes, to show that they've kind of been working on things, but also I hope that it's about Duke getting out and finishing a team early, because not to look towards the Louisville game on Monday, but the Saturday-Monday double always is about conserving as much energy as you can while still inflicting the maximum damage on your opponent. This is a game where if we can get out to an early lead, maybe we can get some guys some rest, get some guys in the game that don't get a lot of minutes, and again, build their confidence as well, because we're going to need all 9 guys against both Wake Forest and Louisville, and I want to see a game where they come out and understand that, yes, we're focused on Wake Forest, but let's take them out early so that we can work on some things during this game.
And I just hope
I'm hopeful for that.
Yeah, well, and I hope the games happen because I don't want there to be snow and craziness and such. It'd be better if everybody has their power and everybody's warm and all that other kind of stuff. So
have the snow come up here to DC. Ain't no games up here that we're worried about. Hopefully everything remains safe down there. And again, everybody, wherever you are, if you're in the path of the storm, please, please, please remain safe. But that will do it for this episode of DBR Bites. We will obviously be back after the game on Saturday to recap everything. But until then, he's Jason. I'm Donald. That sound you hear, it's the Duke Band playing us out and taking us into a winter wonderland.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now, you call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.